60, 70, even 80% of the American population, at least, believes that indeed the aliens are here and occasionally crashing their spacecraft into places like Roswell, New Mexico, whatever. And not only that, but a similar percentage thinks that not only are they here, but the government knows they're here. When they say the government, of course, they always mean the American government. Now, I haven't always lived in America. I mean, I lived in Europe for quite a while. And the government there, well, let me put it this way. The populace there didn't have this penchant that the Americans do for being very suspicious of their own government, right? So, nobody there thought that, I lived in Holland. I don't think there were too many Dutchmen that thought, the Dutch government is keeping secret that the aliens have actually come to Rotterdam or something. They just didn't have that mindset. Americans like the idea of conspiracy. They like the idea that the government is working against them. In some sense, that's maybe not such a bad idea, but on the other hand, I don't see any evidence for it when it comes to aliens.
You brought up UFOs. I definitely have to get your thoughts on this. It's interesting because I think the fervor with UFOs hurt SETI in the past because it got conflated with the purpose of SETI, and as a result, the government removed funding for SETI. It was privately funded for so many years. Now with this increased interest in UFOs and UAPs, it feels like the government needs subject matter experts and you guys happen to be happily positioned. So it feels like UFOs, which hurt SETI in the past, now might be benefiting you. This increased interest might help SETI in the future. Would you agree?
Well, I don't actually agree that the whole UFO phenomenon hurt SETI. There were people who said that. There were people that I worked with who said that, but I was not one of them. I thought that it was actually a good thing because it stimulated the public's interest in the idea that there might be intelligent life out there. And sure, it wasn't terribly realistic, but you don't expect, cowboy films aren't terribly realistic either, but they stimulate a certain amount of interest in the Old West. So maybe they're a good thing. If you're into cowboy culture, right? Or maybe the beef industry, I don't know. But the fact that there were all these cheesy movies being made, I just thought that was a good thing. I still enjoy going to sci-fi films because what you see there, which you don't see almost anywhere else, are depictions by people who think they have a good idea about what the future might look like or what a society on another world might look like. And, it's mostly imaginative and not necessarily based in very much science. But on the other hand, it's almost always very creative, and I like that.
Yeah, I like it as well, but I feel like the merging of the conspiracy theories and these artistic interpretations of some amount of pseudoscience hurt SETI in the sense that the government removed funding from SETI in the past.
It did, but I don't think it had much to do with any of that.
Okay.
The reason it was defunded, it was mostly the work of a senator from Nevada, Richard Bryan. He did it, and he did it for political reasons. It had nothing to do with the science, right? He was looking for an issue that he could use to get reelected. And he had tried another issue. I think it had to do with, fur coats and stuff like that. But that didn't do much good. But railing against this government program, because it was a NASA program then, that was spending taxpayers' dollars to look for ET. Well, he found that was easy to parody. That was easy to criticize, and he did do that. And rather quickly after he started doing that, in fact, the NASA SETI program was killed. I recall that quite well, actually. I had worked out how much it was costing taxpayers to have this program, and it was about 3 cents per year per taxpayer. It wasn't terribly expensive. But I remember driving home that day after we learned that the SETI program had been killed, and my neighbor was washing his car in the driveway next to mine. And he said, hey, when he saw me come home, he said, well, Seth, sorry you lost your job. I said, but, I'm saving 3 cents this year. That was his reaction.
There is a silver lining. Is there any UFO UAP report that you feel is particularly interesting? There have been a lot that's been in the news lately. Commander David Fravor had the Tic Tac. There's been Bob Lazar, the Roswell incident. Is there any one UFO report that you feel is particularly legitimate?
No, I don't know of any that I find terribly credible. Keep in mind, there are like somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 UFO reports every year. Now, that isn't the number of people who think they've seen a UFO or have seen a UFO, think they've seen an alien craft. That number is undoubtedly very much larger, but they don't report it, right? This is the number of people who actually took the time to look up an organization that logs these reports. And, it's still close to 10,000 a year. Honestly, I think you should be very chary, very suspicious of the idea that indeed, some of these reports are authentic, that the aliens really are visiting and it's all being covered up. To begin with, it isn't clear to me why they'd be covered up. I think I've said that. But not only that, it's a little bit self-centered, put it that way, to think that the aliens would only visit, the American Southwest, right? They never seem to visit other countries, or at least you don't hear much about that. And I've lived in other countries, and this whole phenomenon wasn't nearly as marked as it is here in the United States. Americans love the idea of the government keeping secrets from them. That doesn't mean that the government is keeping secrets about aliens from them. You couldn't keep it secret. Honestly, you couldn't. I mean, you'd want every scientist in the world, or not every scientist in the world, but a lot of them, to be looking at that phenomenon. They would want to, learn everything they could about possible alien visitors. But they're not doing that. They're not beavering away on that problem. And the reason they're not is not because it wouldn't be interesting. It's only because they don't see very good evidence that it's true.
I completely resonate with having some skepticism for all the frequent UFO abduction reports. But one thing I find very surprising is that the Pentagon released footage of UAPs, and their conclusion was, we have no idea what this is. And there seems to be no urgency in solving the matter. If the aerospace has been compromised, either you solve this issue in a day or you find out what's happening. But it just feels like the Pentagon released the footage and said, okay, this is it. We don't know what to do.
Yeah, well, I understand the Pentagon's interest. Actually, I grew up 2 miles from the Pentagon, and a lot of my neighbors actually worked at the Pentagon. I would occasionally go there with my father, actually, to use the gymnasium they had. But the fact that there isn't any urgency by, the federal government, or for that matter, the science community, to try and understand better UFOs or UAPs, whatever the trendy term is these days, I think that just is an indication of how seriously they take that phenomenon, right? Because I think a scientist said to me, a buddy of mine actually, he said, look, Shostak, if I thought there was a 1% chance that any of that were true, I'd spend all my time working on it. I don't think he's exceptional in the sense of, suggesting something that he would do that nobody else would do. You'd have tens of thousands of scientists working away on this problem if they thought there was good reason to believe that the aliens actually had sent spacecraft to Earth.
But they haven't even explained it away.
Well, they do explain it away. I mean, it's like saying, look, there are all these unsolved murders, and consequently, aliens must be killing people here on Earth. Well, that's one possibility, but I think that you have unsolved murders simply because you haven't solved the murders, right? And we haven't explained away all the sightings. A lot of them are witness testimony cases, right? Somebody sees something in the sky, they don't understand it, it becomes a sighting, and then people will say, well, see, the aliens are really here, and you just won't believe it. No, I mean, what it means is that, they saw something in the sky. We weren't there. There weren't 100 people on the ground with cameras photographing it, so we don't know what it was. There are a lot of things that people see and you don't know what it was, right? You hear a strange sound at night when you're lying in bed. In most cases, I don't know what it was, but I don't assume that it was aliens or anything particularly exotic.